Good news indeed. Hello, my name is Chris Maguire. I'm the Executive Editor of Business Cloud, and I'm your host today. And we are in for some fun because we've had lots of fun behind the scenes as well. We are joined by 4 of the best speakers that money can buy with my budget. They've come from all across the world. In fact, one of them travelled all the way from Australia, albeit he's working in England, which is the reason he's here today. We're going to be looking at lots of issues today, but we're going to look at the future of publishing and content platforms. And we're going to look at both from the section of newspapers and also a little bit further afield as well. I'd like to introduce our 4 speakers. Nicola Adam is the Deputy Editor of Lancashire Post and Blackpool Gazette. Nice to see you, Nicola. How are you?
Morning. Good. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, Dan Lucas, Digital Director of the Creative Tourist Consults. He's Australian, but we won't hold that against you. How are you, Dan?
I'm very well, thank you, Chris.
Stephen Bolton, Commercial Director of Lancashire Business View. How are you, Stephen?
Very well, thank you, Chris.
Okay, and last but definitely not least, John Holliday, all the way up in Cumbria, is the Managing Director of Cumberland and Westmoreland Herald. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. I'm well, thank you.
Okay, Nicola, I'm going to start with you, if I may, actually. So, we hear a lot about the newspaper industry. We hear a lot about the travails that they're facing as well. Just give us an overview from your perspective of the challenges facing the newspaper industry.
Well, obviously, the newspaper industry is generally struggling and generally trying to find a way to survive and find that magical tipping point with digital stroke newspapers and retain both if possible. Obviously, when lockdown hit, all of our advertising revenue just vanished, completely disappeared, which is our main source of income. So our main source of income is advertising. Obviously, cover sales of the newspapers do play a part, but advertising is our main revenue. Now, the company kind of survived throughout lockdown by certainly on the advertising side of things, a lot of people were furloughed. Not on the editorial side, just the advertising side. And we've been, I'm not going to lie, but we've massively been helped by the government because the government have placed coronavirus related advertising in all of our titles, which has been a major kind of help for us throughout. But now we're sort of coming out the other side and it's like, how are we going to manage now? Advertising is coming back gradually, but I don't think it'll ever come back to the same level it was before. So we're trying to find a way forward.
And the reality is, of course, is that newspapers, were struggling a bit even before COVID-19. It's a challenge, and then COVID-19 has come and made it even worse as well. Back in 2007, and I should say, for the sake of clarity, is that I worked within Johnston Press. I worked as the editor of the Chorley Guardian as well. Back then, the Lancashire Evening Post was chosen to pilot the digital newsroom of the future, which would see staff producing audio and video content for the web and mobile phones, as well as for the main paper. How does it work now?
Well, we've kind of evolved it feels like loads of times since then. We're constantly evolving. There's constantly new programs. We've got a new one at the moment called Digital Acceleration, which was kind of halted by coronavirus. But the way we work now is we're digital first. So everything we produce goes online first. Our focus every day, I have a news conference. Every day, the first thing we talk about is our analytics, our figures for the web. So our main focus is online. And the newspapers are, gradually the digital acceleration process, just to explain what that is going to mean. And we're not quite there yet in the Northwest titles. Some of our areas around the country are already in it. It's just we were doing one at a time and we haven't been done before coronavirus. And basically what it means is every single reporter will just write online and effectively the newspapers will be curated by small teams out of that content that's being produced online. And that is the idea anyway. It's not quite that simple. There's issues around like features and long reads and investigations, which it wouldn't quite work like that. But certainly the majority of the papers will be produced in that way. So that's the way we're moving forward.
I should just say, Nicola, it's worth saying that, you've got an impressive bookcase in the background there. You can always tell when we do these calls, whether they're Zoom calls or things like this, whereas the other 3 speakers haven't bothered with anything in the background. I'm very disappointed. Well, let's talk about the paywall, because 2 months ago, the Lancashire Evening Post introduced a paywall. Yeah. How has that worked? How does it work? I think you pay £1. Is it £1 a week? Just explain the way your paywall works.
Yeah, well, all of our daily titles at JPI Media have now introduced a paywall. So this isn't our weekly titles like the Chorley Guardian. They're still free at the moment. The idea is that you we get people to register. So you can register and not pay. So once you've registered, we kind of like hooked people in a little bit, I guess, and they start getting newsletters and prompts. You get 5 stories a week free. So somebody who doesn't know the paper, who's logging off the first time, they will be able to read the story. But once you've used it 5 times that week, it will prompt you. You will not be able to see the whole story. It will prompt you to pay. Our sort of starting point is from £1 a week. That is an introductory price. It will go up at a point. And there'll also be things like offers and offer codes and stuff introduced along the line as well. But honestly, we were expecting, certainly the Blackpool Gazette went first. So it's that Blackpool Gazette's actually been on a paywall for almost a year now. And the Lancashire Post has just gone. Actually, the Lancashire Post, we haven't. It's bizarre, really, because our figures went up massively during lockdown. You can imagine our on digitally were enormous. It was amazing, really. But in terms of the paywall, we were expecting a massive hit, and if that is, it hasn't really made a massive difference. There's been a slight tailing off, but I don't know whether there was a bad tailing off last week, but that turned out to just be the algorithm from Facebook.
Oh, don't talk about algorithms, Nicola. We've had enough of algorithms. But what
not too bad.
Your USP ultimately is local, isn't it? And I know, for example, in your case, nostalgia pictures are big for you as well.
Yes.
So if you're going to work and you'll succeed, you won't succeed on trying to compete with the nationals nationally. You'll compete with them, or you'll compete by working local, which is another point John's going to pick up on when we come to him fourth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you say, our USP is that we are local newspapers. We have that local content. We are working. Our reporters are sitting in this community and working in this community, and our focus is absolutely local. We do have teams around the edges doing kind of national must-have content, and that is simply so that we're not repeating ourselves. So when coronavirus came along, it made sense for one person to be doing a guide to how to social distance, not have 300 newspapers around the country all having a staff member writing that same content. So that's why we do have shared content in that way. But we are not trying to compete with the nationals. You're right. We pick and we choose. When we pick up national stories, we pick those that will impact our readers. But our focus is on local content.
You've got 112,000 followers on Facebook. You've got 70,000 followers on Twitter as well. Do you think there's an acceptance now that your audience isn't necessarily just your ABCs, your newspaper sales, it's your global footprint? And also, talking about platforms, do you see yourself as you don't see yourself as an autonomous printed product. You see yourself across the piece. So it doesn't matter how people view the news, as long as people view it from one platform or another.
Yeah, people, there's like you say, the audience for the paper is relatively small these days. Our online audience is enormous. The figures you just said is just the Lancashire Post. If you add in all of our titles across the Northwest, each with a Facebook page, each with a Twitter account, each with, Instagram in some cases or whatever, our audience is enormous, and people are coming to us from all those different directions online, and they're not people who might traditionally read a newspaper. But even if they're not, they still know what the Lancashire Post is. I think our massive, what's really good for us is our brand. Our brand is enormous. Whether people read it or not, they'll have heard their parents talk about it, their grandparents, So that's what we have to make the most of. And we also have to push quality content. We have to be pushing that quality local journalism. That's where we come in. We need people to go. It happened during coronavirus, and actually we were quite, oh, right, okay. When it happened, people were like, there's all this noise about it, and people were like, right, okay, there's been local lockdown rules imposed in Preston. Where do we go to find out about it? People were coming to us, and that is just, that is where our strength lies. People know they can come to us and get the actual accurate information, not just Facebook speculation, or there is some local sites that are just spouting all sorts, and they know they can come to us. So, and there's no checks and balances. You're, I think, established 1886. So you've been around a long time as well. I'm going to come to Dan Lucas now, but Nicola, what I would say, a couple of things is you can listen to Nicola on BBC Radio Lancashire. She's on a Sunday as well, and you are, without doubt, Nicola, the best speaker we've had so far today. So thank you very much for that. Right, Dan Lucas.
now, if I've understood it correctly, Dan, you set up the Creative Tourist Consult 12 years ago, and you help brands and destinations sell themselves online. Is that correct? Have I got it right, or is that fake news, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it shifts around quite a bit. We're quite diversified, I suppose you'd say. So we have our hands in a few different pies. But one of the things we do is sort of place branding. So we work with destinations like York, for instance. So we did a big project with them last year for sort of rebranding York. For Southend, we're working with a project with Southend on a branding project at the moment. And we also do strategic consultancy with destinations, but particularly from a sort of cultural tourism viewpoint. So looking at cultural audiences, the cultural offer, and how they can use that to draw in visitors and engage them with their cultural offer. And that's always had quite a big digital component as well. I mean, my background is digital. 12 years ago, I was a lowly SEO working for an SEO agency in Manchester when I started working on this on creativetourist.com, which is our consumer website, as a sort of an SEO project, and gradually have been more and more absorbed with that side of things as well. So we have this sort of project side, digital project side to what we do too. We do campaigns as well. I'm
going to take you back. Jump into this, time machine with me. I'm going to take you back to 12 years ago when you started. When we spoke then, or if we were speaking then about content, we were talking about blogs, weren't we? And I think one of the challenges that you had, effectively, you were funded by the sort of cultural sector, and you were writing for the cultural sector. So you were very niche, weren't you? You weren't able to get any scale.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that scale was necessarily what we were after then, and I'm not sure that's what we're after now. We were set up, as you say, we set up about 12 years ago as a blog, but it was funded by a grant from Arts Council England, and it was specifically there to sort of serve cultural audiences and serve the cultural sector and help people find, stuff to do in Manchester, especially at that time. And we've since kind of grown out across the north. And that was, it was very bloggy back then. And the kind of content we had tended to be, long form articles, 1,000 words about a particular artist or an exhibition. And that was great in terms of, positioning Manchester as a cultural destination, in terms of engaging really kind of highbrow cultural audiences with a sophisticated cultural offer that we have here in Manchester. But as you say, it's not a volume thing. And as we kind of transition to needing to become more commercial once the funding dries up, obviously the nature of the business model changes, and the nature of the content that you produce and the way you work with your partners changes then as well. I wouldn't say that we're too niche. I'd say that.
Sorry, Dan, you have to forgive me. I don't like interrupting an Australian, but I'll make an exception in your case. I want to just talk about content again. And, in terms of having great content is one thing, but and this is a point that you stressed to me when we were talking last week, it's all about being part of a journey. You need SEO. There's no point in creating great content if you don't get it to the audience that you're targeting. That's pivotal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the big kind of problem that we see is where the business strategy of a publisher or of any organization really, the way they make their money is not aligned with their engagement strategy, with how they engage their audiences and what they want their audiences to do. And for us, really, as a sort of content-centered engagement strategy, the content that we have, so that's in most cases that's sort of listings for cultural activity, events, attractions, and so on. And also the guides that kind of sit at a level above that. And for us, 80% of our audience comes from these guide pages, like exhibitions in Manchester, or things to do in Manchester, or cinema in Manchester, or yoga studios in Manchester, or across the north. And so the content needs to the content needs to work really hard in terms of bringing in that traffic from those sorts of search terms to a guide page where they can then discover all of the listings that are available, the product that's available, and then they click through to our partners. And for us, that's where our kind of business model, where the partners we work with are the cultural organizations who want to promote their offer, and our engagement model, which is that people want to find things to do. They get to a listing, they click through, and they do it. And I think that coming back to your earlier point about niche, about being niche, it's by being niche that we actually bring in the audiences who want to do things, rather than kind of creating friction by bringing in audiences who say, "What's this cultural trash? I'm not interested in culture."
No. Well, I live in Chorley, and we love culture in Chorley. But I want to talk about publishing, bring it back to publishing, if I may. In terms of, you changed your business model very sensibly, actually. You realised that your staff were spending all their time sourcing content, and you pivoted your business. So actually, you got all the content provided for you, pretty much, and then you charge people for putting it on the platform, which is a fantastic business model as well. I mean, you worry about, in terms of modern day publishing, in terms of newspapers, and we're talking to a couple of newspapers on this panel as well. It's all about conversion rates, and it's because ultimately it's about generating revenue, and you worry for advertising only generating newspapers or news platforms, don't you? Tell us why.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously two sides to this. One is how you're making money and how much money you're making, and the other point, which I think Nicola was referring to as well, was how much it costs you to produce the content that drives that approach. And for us, I guess, shifting from this kind of funded model where we could publish whatever we liked and we were paid to produce it, and it didn't necessarily have to deliver anything tangible, to something where we needed to deliver results for our partners. If we were running a campaign for, let's say, Royal Exchange Theatre, we needed to be able to drive traffic through to the Royal Exchange Theatre website that went on to book. And we make money from selling campaigns to do that. But we don't make enough. If we were running on the old model, we were paying, 400 quid for an article from a Guardian copywriter, and they would produce it long form and publish it on the site. It might take them a day to do that. That was in no way sustainable. So as you say, we moved to this model where the partners supply us through our Culture Host listings platform with the raw information about what events are happening, about their venues. We then use that to create the listings on our own website, and that then drives that visitor journey. But we also, because the big problem with that is, how do you get the partners to upload their content? It's surprisingly challenging. The way we did that was actually by opening up those listings to everyone else who wants to use them. So visitmanchester.com draws on those same listings. Manchester Wired draw on those same listings. Publishers who you might think are our competitors, we let them draw on those listings, because for us, we don't care. We don't really think that we have competitors. We're targeting this very niche audience. What we want are the listings. And if other people want to draw on those, that's just another carrot for our partners to do that really challenging job of uploading the information about what's going on.
So Dan, I mean, I look at the Manchester Evening News website, and they're held up as an exemplar of a website of a newspaper that drives huge amounts of traffic. The point is, of course, is that driving huge amounts of traffic to a website per se isn't going to pay for a newsroom, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to pay for a newsroom, and it might not satisfy your. I mean, I'm not commenting on MEN here in any way, but if you're a mainstream publication and you're trying to sell a particular offer, a niche offer or any kind of product, and that's not aligned with the reason your audience is coming to your website, then you're going to get tiny click-through rates. If you get 100,000 sessions on your website, which is kind of the territory we're in, and you have a bunch of display ads, you might get a click-through rate of, 1% if you're lucky. You're talking about 1,000 clicks at maybe, 5p per click. No one is going to make any money from that. So you've got to be looking at other models. But if your partners, the people that you're sending that traffic through to, can definitely see that you're worth investing in, and that your traffic is converting so much better than any other source, and especially than a mainstream source, then they're going to spend their money with you rather than spending it with them. And so I think that's kind of the thing for us, that when I say coming back to that point about being too niche, it's by being niche that we can actually deliver that value for the partners that we work with. Where if we were a more mainstream site trying to sell culture, which is still a pretty niche product in many ways, it could be really challenging. And we see that across all of publishing. If you're a mainstream site selling cars, yeah, maybe with ads for cars, I should say. Whereas if you're a car magazine and you've got car ads, that's perfectly aligned, and you should expect to see good conversion coming out of that.
Okay, if you were on a lake right now in your little boat, I'd be saying, Dan Lucas, your time is up. Come on in. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Stephen Bolton. Stephen from Lancashire Business View. You joined Lancashire Business View 2004. I think it actually kicked off proper in 2005. Your background, of course, was the Lancashire Evening Telegraph in Blackburn as well. You took the decision to get out of newspapers back then because you didn't like the way it was going. What do you mean by that, Stephen?
I just thought the landscape was changing. I was tasked with developing the business supplements for the Lancashire Telegraph. And at the time, a lot of the advertisers were wanting more of a glossy feel magazine. So I fed that back to the directors, and they just didn't really seem an appetite. They were happy to continue producing the supplements as newspaper format. And I think if you look overall at the newspaper when it was, and I'm going back 17 years now, so it's a long time, but you know, the big drivers then were recruitments, motors advertising, property, and it was just changing. The landscape as a whole was changing, and I just thought it was the right time just to move on. Had a conversation with Richard Slater. He was planning to develop Lancashire Business View, and unbeknown to me at the time, I've been doing the research because I've been hearing what the clients wanted, and I just thought it was the right move at the right time.
It's something that Nicola touched on, and I would have asked more about it if we'd had more time. But the point is that, you know, it's putting a value on what you do, it's putting a value on the service that you provide. I mean, Lancashire Business View, you know, for somebody like myself, you know, it's a bi-monthly magazine, and it's got a website and a magazine backed up. You stick to your knitting, don't you? You only go in Lancashire. You wouldn't think about expanding any further afield. Just explain what the principle is of Lancashire Business View. What it is you're trying to achieve.
It's a bit like Ron Seal. We are what we say on the tin. So, you know, if there's news from
you're not wooden, Stephen. I think Richard Slater's look like he's been dipped in a bit of Ron Seal, but anyway,
I think for us, it's a case of knowing your audience. Nicola touched on it before. Lancashire is such a vast area for us still to go at. There's a lot of opportunity that we believe that we can still develop. There's businesses that we've not engaged with. Never say never. I'm not sitting here saying we'll never expand, but at the moment, there's more than enough on a plate to develop Lancashire as a whole.
Do you think you're being pragmatic or unambitious, though?
I don't think we're being unambitious. I think, if anything, we're just seen as an opportunity to grow within the county that we live and work. And again, Nicola and Dan have touched on this before. It is massively about the content. We are based in the county. We live and breathe it. We understand the county. We understand the business community. And I just think there's more opportunity for us to develop that. It's as simple as that. I mean,
it's a phrase we hear a lot. Content is king. I mean, you've got a magazine which is, it comes out every other month, which is more featurey and interview-led. You've got your website, which is more news-led as well. So they've both got their own separate identities as well. In terms of the magazine, you think producing something glossy, adding a bit in terms of quality, it's got a good shelf life. So you still believe in the printed product, don't you?
Massively, yeah. And that's the response that we get. A lot of appetite for what we do. And I think going through the pandemic as we have, I think there's almost been a renaissance of direct mail. People want to read actual hard copies. It's not all about the digital side. I think there's a balance for both. So when we launched the website on the back of the magazine, we didn't want to just replicate what we had in print. We saw an opportunity to promote the latest news, key events. Because we're bi-monthly as a magazine, as soon as it's back from the printers, if it was news generated, it would be out of date, and that's fact. So what we're looking at is key features, interviews, opinion pieces, expert commentary, stuff that does have a long shelf life. On the flip side, the website then gives us another platform just to reach out to a different audience and to promote the latest news.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well, I don't know if you want to talk numbers, but just talking generally, you make sure that every page in the magazine has got a value attached to it, a financial value. So you want to hit X amount of pounds for each page as well. So the one thing you won't be doing, Stephen, is ringing somebody up to say 10 minutes before deadline, you can have this page for a third of the normal price, because you don't believe that's the way to go.
I just think that devalues your products. And it's something that from day one we agreed we wouldn't do. I think if we're brutally honest, I think in the very early days when it was a real struggle and we were just trying to gain market share and create some interest and some goodwill, it would have been very tempting to go back to people and say, look, you know, we quoted you X, we can give it you for Y. But we stuck to our guns. And I think that part of the reason we did that is I refer to village mentality. Lancashire does have village mentality. People know everybody else. And I think if word spread that we were offering cheap advertising, I think that would potentially have been our downfall. So we've always made sure that we stick to the rate card and we get people paying the same rate. And it's something that we've honoured.
One thing that's interesting is I, in wearing another hat, tried to get something published in a manufacturing publication. And I went onto the website and it was, you can pay £125 to get your story uploaded onto the website. Now, what's interesting is, and that's a different website to the main website. It's almost like a plate version. So I looked at Lancashire Business View. You've got your LBV hub, haven't it? So people pay the princely sum of £10 a month, and they can upload as many stories as they want onto your LBV hub. Tell us what that's about, the principle behind that, and do you make much money out of it? Because you'd have to make a lot of £10 to make a sizable sum.
Well, the plan long term is that it becomes one of the mainstay revenue generators of their overall business. We introduced it because we wanted people partly paying for the magazine, but also added value so that they were able to just upload stories. I will mention that we do moderate everything, so everything's checked before it is uploaded officially onto the website. But it's worked very, very well. I think I think at the moment we've got just over 200 members. We have a plan to double that in the next 12 months. It's not going to make us millionaires. It's not intended to be that, but it is a revenue generator, and it's recurring income, and that's really important for us as a business. It's the base model.
Stephen, you've done a better job than Richard Slater could have done, absolutely explaining that, and I will tell him the opposite of that when I speak to him. John Holliday, Managing Director of Cumberland and Westmoreland Herald. Now, delighted to say for the viewing audience of millions, you are a former footballer and you've played for some of the biggest clubs in the country. Tell us who you've played for, John.
Carlisle and Mansfield. So
absolutely. So if we've got any Carlisle and Mansfield fans watching us today, you can sort out a signed photo. John, I mean, you had a remarkable career, really remarkable. Hopefully you've got many more years to come. You started in local journalism, you went to the TV, you worked at Bloomsbury, worked at Sky News. Just tell us a bit about your career, if you can. Just keep it nice and short and sweet, because it's been a long career.
Sure. You know, I've just been lucky to play pro football, lucky to have landed a second career as a journalist, lucky to move out into telly because I thought there was no money in local newspapers, lucky to get picked up by the Beeb, Sky, Bloomberg, and lucky really to end up as a business exec where I was fortunate to run a broadcast tech company, and lucky that I made it truly global and doubled its value in less than 3 years. Just very lucky.
What I find amazing about you is we met for the first time at the start of this year, and you see yourself as very, very lucky. And I'm going to bring in some of your personal life, if I may. You had stage 4 cancer, beat that. You had a severe stroke, beat that. And I think you've got 4 young children running around your house now. Just tell us a bit about that side of your life, because you are a glass half full person, aren't you?
Yeah, I think you've got to be, Chris. You know, I am. You know, I do see myself as being very lucky. You know, cancer, stage 4 cancer was hard. I had a high chance of dying, but got through that. Stroke, I think, is harder. The thing about cancer and stroke, everyone asks me a question about, you know, is it more difficult having cancer than a stroke? Cancer is binary. There's only 2 outcomes: you either live or you die. Whereas with a stroke, you know, a lot of it's about rehab, and I guess that's where I was lucky with my football. I was injured a lot playing football, so I was very adept at rehab, and I worked very hard. And I've been, you know, fortunately been in the top 2% of stroke recoveries probably in the UK.
Yeah, and just tell us about your children as well, because that's a remarkable story as well.
Well, yeah, you know, we've got a 6-year-old daughter and 3-year-old triplets.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, anyone who's got triplets, I doff my cap. It's blooming hard. Twins are hard, but triplets are really hard. Even with a nanny, it's just really hard. But they're a formidable little team. And even at 3 years old, they all gang together and tell me off now if I have to tell any of them off. So, you know, they're all against me.
It's no holiday in the Holiday household, that's for sure. Now, let's talk about your career. I could almost hear the deafening roar of applause then to my desperate pun. But if we talk about your career, how has it changed, do you think, in terms of, you know, our approach to it, in terms of publishing, technology, content?
Well, I think the media industry has changed beyond belief. You know, if we go back to the dawn of the millennium, the world we live in now is just so completely different. You know, I'll never forget when at Sky, some American TV execs came over in 2006, and we were talking to them about avatars. And they told us the future is about tech, and you know how people would get in the car and the car would weigh them, would ring the doctor if they're overweight, it would drive itself. And I was sat at that meeting thinking, these guys are mad. And basically all they told us then is starting to come true. You know, in 2000, mobile phones were just the beginning to become popular. No social media. You'll remember this, Chris, your age. You know, it's dial up to get the internet. You know, newspapers and magazines were saying,
yeah, I actually remember that. I used to go, well, we know what it went like, but yeah, absolutely.
When I started TV, I just missed out on film, but you know, when I went and did the Solway Harvester disaster as a reporter, story out on the Solway coast, and crikey me, there was 4 of us went out in the van. There was a sound recorder, so there's me, the reporter, there's an electrician, there was a cameraman. We went and did track the story, took the pictures, and a guy came up in a car 2 hours to pick the tape up to bring it back to Carlisle to send it to the lunchtime news and ITN. Those days have changed incredibly now. Twitter changed a lot of things fundamentally, I think, for media companies back in, with the Arab Spring, nationally anyway. And when you look at the big picture now, I see print and text media numbers are down, social and video are up, policy and serious news is down, people news is up, arguably, truth is down, if you listen to Trump anyway, interesting gossip up.
I mean, I find it interesting. You just mentioned like dial-up modems and stuff. I was trying to explain to my children that, what Pac-Man was, and they just couldn't understand what a fantastic game that was. I want to talk about the Cumberland and Westmoreland Herald, which you are at the moment, I think. Earlier this year, 160-year-old newspaper, went into administration, was brought out of administration by a local businessman called Andy Barr. You were brought in as the MD. You quickly turned a hefty loss into a healthy profit. How have you achieved that, John?
First thing, day one I did was increase the price of the publication from £1 to £1.50, which proved a really smart move. I budgeted for losing 8 to 12% of my customers, but only lost 3%. The really loyal paying customers. Then, like any sort of businessman, I reviewed why it failed. Partly through pension deficit, which everyone hides behind, but mainly through mismanagement. And I thought, people look at, and I look around and everyone looks at cutting costs. And the first thing I looked at was, how can we grow this company? Yeah. And, I spoke to stacks of people. I looked at the big regionals, JP and NewsQuest and what they were doing. I spoke to scores of people in the industry vets, industry insiders, even a private equity boss who tried to hire me in the US, who owns a local newspaper group called Patch, which is making money. He bought it off AOL from, I think he was losing $50 million a month, $50 million a month, and they've turned that round. But it's all about customers, really. They're our North Star, and I think we sometimes forget, what do customers want? And I think to grow a business, you've got to have a vision and a concept, and then we've got to wrap some sort of capability around it. Then we've got to build the right culture.
You bought another newspaper, I think, called the Keswick Reminder, which is much smaller circulation. I think the circulation of the Cumberland and Westmoreland is about 9,000 thereabouts, whereas Keswick is a lot smaller. You actually believe that all towns will have a newspaper, which flies in the face of what a lot of people think, which that newspapers are rowing back. What do you base your optimism on, John? Well,
when I looked around, I followed my line of thought. I was thinking, right, I have a strategy of going uber local. I believe that customers still want local news. Yeah, so I look at, we're parish pump. We are, the customers can get lots of things from the internet, but they can't get local news, really, really local news story, I don't think, well enough. So, the newspapers that we're doing are really attacking uber local news. I think the workers slogan, local names, local faces, local places, and really drill down. Therefore, if you think 100 years ago, all the towns in Cumbria would have 2 newspapers possibly. They all have their own newspaper. In Penrith, where I'm based now, there's 2 newspapers, and now there's one that's seen sales decline. But I believe that if there's 25,000 people live in Maryport, and I can sell local ads, and I can sell 1,000, 2,000 newspapers, I can make money out of it. If you think, so why can't I have a Ambleside Advertiser, Cockermouth, Cockerell, and Egremont Echo? All these local towns can have their own paper, and it might just be full of parish pump, but they will have local advertisers because shops still need local people to spend their money there.
I think what I find interesting is that through COVID-19, mainstream media, it's now referred to, it's now got its own initials on Twitter as well. It's being demonized because of their approach to COVID-19 as well. That creates a massive opportunity, doesn't it, for local newspapers? You put a value on your product, much the same way as Nicola has with the Paywall as well. So you put the Cumberland and Westmoreland Herald up by 50p, and you put the Keswick Reminder up from 50p to 90p as well. You believe that you have to attach a value to the work of journalists and newspapers, don't you?
Yeah, I believe people are more accepting for paying, Chris, than they have been historically. There's a story of just like the outgoing editor of the Stoneway Gazette. I read a piece about her, and she was saying people need to be willing to pay. I think people are willing to pay if they get value. And, Nicola touched on this before, you've got to provide these guys with news, entertainment. For me, newspapers and weekly newspapers, the average or 90% of the audience will be 60 to death. We've got to attract 40 and 50-year-olds, the people who want more knowledge and insight about cars, about houses, all the things that we did historically. We've just got to do them better and tell stories better. I have a vision for the Keswick Reminder to be an uber local version of the New York Times. So I inherited this paper that literally looked a little bit like the New York Times, and I've tried to make it even more like the New York Times. But the New York Times is built around A-grade writers, real quality. I was fortunate. I went, when I was at Bloomberg, I went out to America a lot to work, and I fell in love with the New York Times. I thought the quality of the writing there was exceptional. And the guys here, I hope we can improve the quality of our writing, the quality of our storytelling in an uber local way.
I believe, listen, you're talking to the converted. I genuinely believe, certainly did when I was at the editor of the Chorley and Leyland Guardian, that if it happened in Chorley and Leyland, it had to be in the newspaper. And if you couldn't be first with the news, you had to be best with it as well. And if somebody sent in a picture, you had to use it unless there were legal reasons why you couldn't. That was always my view. I'm interested by the website because your experiences with the website are really interesting. So you got involved in the newspaper at the start of this year, and your early conversations in terms of revenue from the online were interesting, weren't they, John? I hope you don't mind me asking you, but can you tell us what that conversation went like?
Sure. The company, when we bought it out of administration, the outgoing MD, I sat with him on day one. I went through the P&L, and there was a line. I looked at revenue, and the line was revenue for the online, for the website, 2016 0, 2017 0, 2018 0, 2019 0, 2020 forecast 0, and I just thought, what are they doing with this? And I realised, he just said to me, it's too hard, you can't make money online, which I completely disagree with. But I think it's a blend of both. I have a distinct strategy for trying to get more tourists to look at our websites, and I can't explain too much more about that at the moment, but that will come to fruition towards the end of the year. But look, news websites, I doff my cap for Nicola when she says that, they're charging £1 a week to get putting behind a paywall for local news. If they can get customers to pay £1 a week, well done, or even more, really well done. I'm not sure my customers up here would pay £1 a week. 6-year-olds living in rural villages, I just don't fit. It's different in towns perhaps, but and cities, but I just don't think they'd pay £1 a week.
And that's the thing, it's that, it's not a one-hat-fits-all, is it? So like a major town like Preston, which has got, got a major football team in the town, it's very different to a market town like Penrith in Cumbria. Or are there any overlaps in your view, John?
No, I think it's very different. I think the customer base is very different. You've got to go back to the customers. What do the customers want? And I think the customers probably want different things. Can I ultimately see a day when we roll out more local newspapers? I can. I really can. I can see us doing. Keswick's my test bed for like a town newspaper, and we've got 2,000 readers there. Can I get that 3,000 readers? Can I make money out of it? Yes, I'm making money now out of it. But can we make more money out of it? Yes, I think we can. And I think, if you look at distribution costs, printing costs are all coming down. Journalist costs, people are paid less than I was paid when I was a journalist 25 years ago. So costs are coming down. There's lots of ways that you can make money, but for me, it is a blend of the two. And it's, going digital first. When I was at Sky in 2006, the boss of Sky News came up with a digital strategy then. It's 14 years on, and Sky News are doing a digital accelerator strategy, which is what Nicola's team are doing there. But, they still do. TV is still very, very important to them, just like I think newspapers are very, very important to local people.
In one line, and it has to be one line because I think we're about to finish. I'll start with Dan, if I may, then I'll go to Nicola, Stephen, and finish with John. What does the future look like? So you can only give me one line, you can't pause for breath. Dan, what does the future look like when it comes to publishing and content platforms?
Better conversion for customers, especially for your partners that you're actually driving the traffic to if you're running on an advertising-based model. Most of the publishing platform, most of the channels that we see that our partners are running advertising on aren't working for them. You need to drive those sales for those partners.
Okay, thanks very much. Nicola, what does the future of publishing and content platform look like?
It's smaller, it's high quality, and it's paid for.
Okay, that's very snappy. You should use that line again, Nicola. Stephen Bolton, what would in your view, what does it look like the future?
I think it's all down to good content, and on the back of that will be good revenue through sponsorship and advertising.
Okay, John, you've obviously cut costs on the electricity because you're in a darkened room, so I'm going to send you 50p. But in your view, what does the future of publishing and content platforms look like?
I continue to hope there'll be a role for print in 10, maybe even 20 years. But the challenge is, I guess, will the generation that has not grown up with papers migrate to print?
Okay, listen, thanks very much, John. I can hear the police coming to arrest you right now. Thanks, Stephen, Nicola, Dan, and thanks very much to the people who have now been watching this webinar. Thanks very much, and thanks to Sam for organising today as well. I think it's been a fantastic 2-day festival. I think it's so important that business is seen to be done and gets done during COVID-19. Otherwise, we're going to be in this mess for a long, long time. Thank you very much, as always, and take care.